Back in January, Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson gave an interview to the Sunday Times. The topic was childcare, and Phillipson certainly tried to come across as staking out a pretty radical pitch. The paper reported that her plan was to guarantee childcare for all parents of children aged 9 months to 11 years. In that interview, Phillipson also said, "This, despite the fact we spend an awful lot of money as a country on childcare, it is fragmented. Providers are closing and childcare is becoming less and less accessible, which is why I believe we need to completely rethink how we deliver childcare. We need to move towards a modern system that runs from the end of parental leave right through to the end of primary school." The paper went on to say this. She added that she wants to make a change in education like the change that we saw post-1945 with the creation of the NHS. That's the scale and ambition that we have. Now, you can't throw around the word NHS without people thinking free at the point of delivery. So a nationalised education system where you have care from cradle, I suppose not till the grave, but till graduation from university, let's say. So it's not surprising that article got people's hopes up when it came to something along the lines of universal childcare. But it turns out that now Labour's plans aren't quite as bold. This headline, 6 months later, is from The Guardian. So Labour rules out universal childcare for young children in fiscal credibility drive. The paper goes on to report this. Instead of offering free or very cheap childcare to every family with a child over 9 months old, Labour is looking at giving more support for poorer families while tapering it off for those on higher incomes. A Labour spokesperson said, quote, "An expansion of childcare to all children is not Labour's policy. Last year, Labour announced that as part of its plan to modernise childcare, that we will deliver free breakfast clubs for all primary school pupils in England, paid for by closing the non-dom tax loophole and allowing councils to offer more childcare provision where they are able to do so." So why are Labour looking to bring in means testing? Well, at the moment, families who earn under £100,000 a year qualify for up to 30 hours free childcare per week during term time, but only for children between 3 and 4 years old. If you're going back to work after maybe 39 weeks maternity leave, that leaves a long time without free childcare. The Guardian goes on to say this. Party sources say that they are keen to eliminate the gap that exists between the end of parental leave and when a child turns free and qualifies for the free hours programme. One of the most effective ways to do this would be to increase means testing, say. Of course, scaling back the ambition on childcare is a result of Labour's commitment to their fiscal rules. But if Labour want to create economic growth, childcare is going to be crucial to that. That's something Phillipson herself recognised back in October last year.
Is the long-term plan to have a state-run early education system like many other European countries?
Well, I'm off to Estonia next week, actually, to look at how other countries are doing some of that, because I don't think we've got all the answers here, and I don't think we've got it right at the moment. We spend an awful lot of money as a country on a system that is still very expensive for parents, that doesn't provide staff working in that vital part of a vital industry, that vital part of our economy, with actually the proper pay and terms and conditions that they deserve. So that's got to be an important part of it too. But this is a real priority for me. I don't think you can talk about growing your economy unless you've got a real plan about how you provide parents with the support that they need around childcare.
It's hard to overstate how expensive and how difficult the childcare sector in England is to navigate right now. According to charity Karam, the average annual full-time cost of childcare for a 2-year-old stands at a whopping £15,000. And even when a child reaches the age of 3, the money offered by the state isn't enough to cover the costs of providers, meaning that according to Ofsted, we're losing around 7% of childminders per year. Some people on Twitter have suggested this is a U-turn. I mean, I'm not sure it's a U-turn, but it's definitely not Labour sort of fulfilling the ambition they were sort of hinting towards, let's say. Is this a shame? Is ruling out universal childcare a bad move?
There's so many bad things about this. I mean, look, exactly as you said, and actually Bridget Phillipson says, and frankly talk to anyone who has small children, like the costs of childcare and the way in which provision is so sort of overstretched absolutely everywhere. It's completely dysfunctional as far as the system goes. And you can go to almost any other European country and find that things just work better there. So Estonia, look across the Scandinavia, you can find much, much better versions of making this happen. What seemed to be the promise from Bridget Phillipson was that this would be the kind of system we'd be moving towards. This would be the gold standard, something like Scandinavian provision, and we'd move towards that. And particularly if you throw in, exactly as you said, the NHS, this sets in people's heads, that's what it's going to be. by walking back from this, it is yet another version of that classic thing with the Starmer leadership, where there's some big promise, and then you step back and step back and step back. And by the time you get at the end, it's this sort of little squeak of an offer of some sort that you end up on this side. This seems particularly squeaky, by the way. The point at which you introduce means testing. I mean, this is a way to really sort of start to undermine a system. Why is the NHS popular? Because it's universal. Everyone can get it, so everyone's got a stake in it. As soon as you introduce means testing like this into a system, you undermine the support and the public support and the credibility of the system. You start to seriously chisel away at the offer you're trying to make, and you start to create a political atmosphere in which that thing will be lost. That's one problem with it. The other one is that, bluntly on this, I think they've also been somewhat outmaneuvered by the Tories. Because if you think back to the budget back in March this year, where Jeremy Hunt's sudden rabbit out of the hat rather was like, here's a load of money for childcare spending. Now, there are all sorts of problems, as you might anticipate, with that relatively big increase in funding. For instance, the additional support for childcare doesn't actually come in until like 2025 or thereabouts. It's short of what you need to pay people properly in the sector with this increase in support that's being promised. But nonetheless, it sort of closes down what Labour, I guess, thought was otherwise a fairly easy space for them, which is to go into childcare, promise something, and it's kind of better than the Tories, whatever you end up doing. And now they got to this bad situation where, okay, they have their own fiscal rules, which are always rather hazy about. So God knows what the real content of these things is. Their own fiscal rules they're trying to meet. No talk about raising taxes to pay for any of this stuff. And therefore, the Tories have occupied your political space, and you just end up with this kind of like, oh, well, it's just going to be at a means testing. Maybe you get a voucher for a nursery or something. God knows what. It's just a bad politics, and it's bad economics for all the reasons that people have pointed out. Like, not having good childcare basically means you have less women participating, able to go out to work, right? That's one of the obvious impacts of this sort of thing. It just doesn't work on every possible level. It's something obvious to try and sort out. And by walking back from it, they're setting up a bad political argument, because the Tories can say they're doing something in this, and what's Labour got as a response? A bit of means testing, okay. That they've offered a pledge that they're now saying they're not really going to meet, so they create an expectation, walk back from it. And of course, on the economic side, it just doesn't make sense for the long term to do this.